Hi everyone, this is Mehul Mehta and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today, we have Dimitri on the podcast. So today the intention is to understand what has happened in the recent changes of H1B and how would it impact both the international students and the American students, and also how would it impact the job situations in the US. So Dimitri, thank you so much for joining in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Dimitri, like, what do you think? Can you tell us like more about what is the announcement on H1B?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of back and forth, and I've seen discussions on how it is written. And then there's been people discussing, like, so and so said, Trump said this, or a government official said something else. The original, I think, statement was it's going to be $100,000 per H1B student or worker per year, which is a crazy large number, and it would essentially halt almost all internationals coming in. Um, I have never seen an H1B hire that we could afford to pay an additional $100,000 onto in the quantitative finance space. We are not hiring executive level people on H1B. So I think that was the original one. Then discussions have come out that perhaps it's only a one-time $100,000 fee for the H1B. That is doable. Banks, corporations, and quant finance could easily do that. Um, we can talk about contracts, which I
Right.
hope don't come into the picture with this, but are going to pop up. And then there's also discussion of there might be a loophole where it's like if you are currently in the US and a student and you're applying for H1B, that your $100,000 would get waived.
Right.
Now, I think it varies. I don't know exactly where it's going to land. I know people are like, "Oh, it's this is what was said," but I don't know how it's going to get implemented because it's government.
Right. So to your point, I agree that it's still in the gray area, that we actually do not know if the rule applies to F1 students or not, because basically they are coming to the States, they are transitioning from F1 to H1, and yeah, still I feel it's a gray area. So also like Dimitri, like what do you think uh from a let's I just want to understand more from an American mindset. uh, yeah, like, is it really impacting the jobs? As people say, it's impacting American jobs and American citizens are not getting jobs. So is it really that impactful? Like I just want to hear your side of story. Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of this should not be controversial, even though it oddly enough is super controversial. I think part of it is because everybody's taking a political stance typically on a part of it. But I think the way that we should view it as is, you know, as an American, right? We want Americans to be employed. Like that's the end goal. Like we have a bunch of Americans, your family, your kids, your brothers, your sisters, aunts and uncles. I mean, you would like everybody to be employed, and we're all Americans. We should all be very pro-American. But then when you look at H1B, the question that comes to that should be the question we're looking at is, do we have holes in our economy of jobs and skills that need to get filled by somebody that we don't currently have here? And I think that discussion has magically not been had by anybody, which seems very odd. But there's a lot of pockets and holes where we don't have them. We're going to talk a little bit about quantitative finance, and that is a hole. We don't have a lot of Americans that have the skill sets that are qualified to fill that hole. And so we often fill that position with some sort of international because we're trying to bring them in and train them and educate them and get them put into a position with it. So I think that's good. I think even as an international, you should think about this from the stance of like, imagine your home country, you're in your home country, and a bunch of people are being shipped in from all over the world to your country to take your jobs. That's how a lot of Americans view it. And I would argue if you're an H1B and your goal is to get to green card, which I would hope most of you are wanting to get to that path, that when you have kids, you would hope that your kids would get hired in the US instead of you saying like, your kid's great, but there's another international coming in. And I think as we look at the spectrum on here, we have some companies that are following the rules. Quantitative finance, especially the big banks, are very by the rule. So, like coming from the big banks, I didn't think it was controversial because they would go through this big process and we do all these interviews and you try to find Americans. And when you can't find Americans, you'd fall back on H1B or other sorts of visas like O1 to fill all these different positions. So it was never really a big deal. But then as the more I've gotten involved in the tech side of it and I've talked to friends about it, and even in banking and finance, we tend to see teams that have very strong nationality internally. So I've seen teams that are almost 100% Indian. I've seen teams that are almost 100% Chinese. I have seen actually Russian teams where almost the entire team is Russian. So it seems very odd, but clearly when you have those sorts of situations, you start to like scratch your head like, why are we not, finding the best talent? And why is everybody the same? So I think those are cases we should probably be a little more aware of and concerned about. I've had friends as well that were talking about in the early 2000s in India, there were companies that were actually placing people. I think it was like an IBM or some of these big tech firms, and there was an entrance exam. So you had H1B, but then you had an entrance exam to work at the company. And for a measly like $10,000, $15,000, you could pay a company to take the exam for you to get the job to set you up to get to the process here. And I think that's where Americans rightfully so are upset, which is like you should not be able to outsource jobs for less wages because it's kind of hurting the US economy. Also, more rightfully so as well with internationals, it hurts them. Like, why would you come here and work for like, 20, 30% less than the American with the same job? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think with the whole debate going on, I think everyone should be on the same page, which is like we need to look at this as what skills do we have? How do we fill them? And I work a lot with universities, so I'm trying to figure out like how do we fill those patches because we clearly have some areas and some specialties that are just missing, I think, in the skill set, which is why H1B has been good in many cases, but then all the abuse cases has also caused a lot of, I think, tension and frustration.
Yeah, so to your point, I totally agree. So I'll give you because this is what I have heard. All big companies, and that too mostly on the IT side, you have IBM, Infosys, Capgemini. They have like so many thousands of employees in India, and they used to file bunch of H1B applications for like let's say thousands of employees. And so whosoever used to get picked, they used to send them to US. So that is where I personally feel the issue would be, because see, let's say if I came in here, I spent $60,000 for my master's, $20,000 another for living, so I actually spent a lot of money to understand, like, just to for my master's and of course for my other stuff. But then someone directly coming to the country, I guess that is where a lot of chaos is being made up. And these big companies, they used to send like thousands of employees every year. And this is where I feel the problem is. And that's what I feel. It's not just like, because F1, if you look at F1 students, I mean, it's hardly, I don't know the number, but I don't feel like the issue is with the F1. That's what I interpret. The issue is with the people who have not taken any degrees in the US and directly coming from, let's say, any third world country directly to the US. And that's what I feel. That's what my interpretation is when I spoke to a lot of individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, then the question is, which we all have, is like, well, how do you stop that?
Right.
And so I think that's what Trump is trying to do in the government, which is like, how do you stop this? Because we don't necessarily want to close all of H1B off. Like, if we just closed H1B, there's going to be industries like quantitative finance where it's like, I don't know where we're gonna have like a winter storm of no employees for a 5 year period. While
Right.
we go, the companies are gonna have to go beg the universities like, hey, you've got to do something. And then the companies and the universities need to go and like beg Americans like, don't just get a STEM degree, but you need to get a combination of math, stats, computer science, and finance and put everything together, which I think is
Right.
a big ask.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what the actual better solution is than charging some exorbitant price where you keep H1B open, but then there's some sort of process in that.
right. Do you think, like, because it's still in the gray area, but do you think is it really possible for, like, for F1, like all this H1B rule, do you think will it be also applied to F1 students, like, who are coming in here for their masters? Do you think would that be a possibility of, because why I ask this question is because a lot of students, international students, they are planning to come next year. Some of them already have admits for spring 26,
Yeah.
but they are really not sure what to do. But I told them that because at least for quant finance, I mean, it's pretty tough. At least what I see right now, you see all top MFE programs, it's all heavily dominated by certain nationalities.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? Do you think this will apply to F1, or if in case it applies, what will happen?
So I think Trump will use the loophole to waive the fee for the F1s. That's just my gut feeling. I know the banks and Wall Street are closely tied in politics, and I think there'll be a loophole for that. Tech seems to be less tied to government, though there's still ties on one of the parties quite heavily. I think that we will see. I think the F1s will get the wave. I think they'll get the pass. Now, even if an F1 gets charged this fee, the question I've had for everybody is like, so let's say you either have the risk to come to the US to pay for the degree and try to get the job. The odds of getting the job now are smaller. But do you really like what is the alternative? Like I've seen Europe. So like where are you at? Like where's the quant finance market? There's no jobs there. And I've had friends that are over there that are like, oh, I took this quant job and I'm doing like menial data cleaning and I'm not doing anything fun or exciting. We haven't done modeling. And there are great jobs I think in London and a few in Switzerland and you know, there's some good jobs scattered. But I think the issue is like where else would you go? And I don't know the answer to that. I part of it I wish these other countries like China and India, for example, which are huge in quant finance, I wish you guys would like fix your problem too, like fix the government. Like India's government's not structured real well for reliability within data, which is why I think the quant market hasn't taken off. From talking to people that are there, though, it sounds like it's improving. Like we're
Yeah.
getting better. And I don't know if this is going to force the issue where it's like a lot of people, to your point, can't afford or don't want to take the gamble to come to the US. If that's the case and you really want to end up in quant finance, I would try to go to one of the big schools in India, but you're gonna have to figure out like how do you fix India or how do you fix China? Because I think we could have great markets. There's lots of people, there's an economy, you know, there's commodities, there's stocks. Like they have a lot of the pieces, but I think that's going to be the challenge of what do you do? Do you try to stay at home, fix the problem? And there aren't a lot of quant programs in India and China. I know India's starting to expand now, which has been great. We're getting more
Yeah, but
education on
still,
that side.
yeah, still we don't have like any reputed, at least as I know, like we don't have any reputed master's program in India. We have something in statistics. We have some schools, some good schools which offer masters in statistics,
Yeah.
but I have not heard anything about the quant finance space. We have someone's, some institutes having boot camps of like 6 months boot camp, but those are not like master's degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like to the alternative, when I was talking to all the students, they said Europe, let's go to Europe. And I said, even if you go to Europe, you would not end up getting a job because the job market in Europe is not that good. And that's why, like US by itself, because the market is big and people have gotten from the past, if you see, at least a lot of Indians have gotten jobs, it automatically becomes the choice of going in. So, now people are confused whether to take that risk and come to US or whether, let's say, spend a good amount of money, go to Europe and test their luck out. So that is the issue that students are facing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess one of the paths to think about too is like, what happens if you do it and it fails? So let's say you come to the US, you get a master's degree, and then you end up having to go home because you can't find a job. You still have the skills though, like you still now have the knowledge. So I would hope at that point somehow you can. How do you turn that into a job? Right? It might not technically be quantitative finance, but maybe you can find a way to contribute back to a company in India. Maybe you can find a way to get into Europe. But I can tell you, US schools tend to hold more weight. And I knew I had a bunch of Indian friends that came to the US, got degrees, and they're like, we're going to go home after 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, why? Like, you spent all this time and money to come here. And they're like, because the US degree tends to hold good weight because we went to, University of Michigan or Columbia or NYU or somewhere. And so I guess the question too is to think about is like, is that going to add value and give you a leg up in India as well going back? I don't know, but I think that might be something to consider as well as like there's at least some value in that kind of proposition.
Yeah, the issue, I can tell you about the issue that most of the student faces, how India perceive is, oh, this guy went to, let's say anyone went to US, oh, the person did not get a job. Maybe he's not that good. That's how people perceive it. People don't perceive it, okay, oh, this person has moved back. They think that, oh, if the person has not gotten into US, job market into the US, the person might not be that great. And so they, instead of looking up, they look down on the person. And that is where the issue
You
is.
say that.
Yeah, that is where the issue is. That's why people do not want to move back.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
that is. Yeah.
That makes sense. I
Also,
mean, I think it's worth it. I think coming to the US to get the US degree is worth it. Um, I would argue though, I think you need to do that mental math of like how much risk tolerance do you have? If you're not like set on this, like you're not going to go broke and homeless trying to do the process, you
right,
shouldn't try it. Because even like in the US, like I left, I was married at 20. So I was out the door, full blown adult, working, trying to get my wife and I was both through college. And then I had to pay for grad school on my own, food, rent. There was no safety net. Like no one was like saying like, oh, if this blows up, like, you can come back to this great family job. And I think for me, it was like, it didn't matter, do or die. I'm gonna make something happen. And even when I went to Michigan, I racked up 160,000 in debt between my wife and I. And then I graduated unemployed. And the university wrote me a letter and said, like, thanks for coming here and being a student, but you're getting kicked out. You're not a student, get out of student housing. And I remember in my head, like, there's no possible way I'm moving back home to Washington State because there's no finance jobs there. It's like suicide. Like I'm gonna be working at like a McDonald's or like, a parts delivery company or, doing something that's not quantitative finance related. And I think you need to put yourself in that same position. Like, are you in a position where you're willing to risk everything to do it? If you've got options and you have a good network at home in whatever country you're in, it might be a much safer and better option to stay home. Or if you're not academically strong, I would argue don't waste the time and money because it's going to be tough.
right. Also, just wanted to understand, let's say someone comes in, the student takes the risk, and now the person is on F1 student visa, and let's say the rule applies to F1 at the moment, right? So the student has 3 years to stay in the US.
Mhm.
uh, so my question is, how does employer sees the student? Will they still hire, or do you think that might be a red flag?
It's a red flag. It's a red flag in the sense of when I hire someone, like I have every intention of keeping them as long as possible. So like I try to make what I call lifetime hires. Like I would love to find an employee that would stay with me for 5 year minimum, maybe 10 years, that really wants to build a career out. It is, I don't know if a lot of students realize this, but it is extraordinarily expensive to hire. So, for example, like I go out and I place an ad and I'm like, I need to hire. Well, now it's my time to write the job description. At work, I reviewed all of the resumes myself. So you can put my, over $250,000 salary on hourly wages of me sitting there reading resumes for who knows why. But even if you have HR staff at $60,000 and you've got 10 HR staff and they're all sorting resumes and stuff, to do a hire costs a lot of money. I had a position I couldn't fill for 2 years. And so I eventually broke down and hired a recruiter who cost me 20% of their salary, which I think came out to like $40,000 for me to hire someone just for the recruiter. But then you have the employees' time and the process and all that. Um, and then even now, I think people don't realize like even when you hire H1B now, it's still 15 to $20,000 in legal fees. And everywhere I've been, I've always paid for the expedited process because I don't want my student that's working for me that's converting from F1 to H1B to say like my application didn't get there in time because now I'm gonna feel awful. So we pay, I think it's like an extra, is it like $2,000 or $5,000 something to get expedited. So I think it's going to be a hard situation where we are. I don't know if I'd be willing to do it, but also
Okay.
in quantitative finance, I might not have an option.
So that's my point. So I actually had a different opinion, to be honest. So what I was thinking in my head is, less people will come in, because of all the risk. So maybe, let's say people, some of the people drop their plan and some of the people take that risk to come in, right? So at a higher level, like if you see less people means less supply, but the
Mhm.
demand is still the same. Firms require risk professionals, quant professionals. So what I was thinking is, because there's a good supply demand gap, firms would tend to hire students who come in, even though I understand to your point, like it's, let's say, 3 years, but they still want someone to do the task, let's say, for 3 years. That's what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we might be put in a position where we don't have a choice. To give people context as well, like I placed my first job opening at one of the firms I was hiring for. I small company. No one had heard of us. I placed a job opening for entry level position, model development, quantitative finance. I got to 400 applications and HR just shut it off and said, that's it. Like, go dig through 400 applications and figure it out. Out of those 400 applications, I had tons of Americans apply, again, who I'm guessing just can't read or don't understand quant finance because all of them are bachelor's degrees. They were not masters and PhDs, which requires a minimum skill level because I don't want to train them because it's going to take me 2+ years, maybe 4 years to train you to be halfway functional with a bachelor's degree from any student. And then even after you go through that full process, I narrowed it down to two people, only two people out of 400 people that were going to be possibly able to do the job. And I still have to take a gamble and hire one of them and hope it works out. And I ended up making the hire of the one, and he turned out to be excellent. Stellar candidate, perfect candidate. But even in that process, like in my head, we actually think about the H1B because I think about like, I have Americans applying. Can I put an American in the position? Because one, it's cheaper because I don't have to pay for all the legal fees. And two, the purpose of H1B is to fill a position where an American can't fill it. So do I have an American at a rinky-dink small company with 400 applications that could possibly fill this? And the clear answer was no. There was just no one that applied. I didn't even have Americans applying from good quantitative finance masters. Like nobody applied. And I use my YouTube channel, to to bring in applications and everything. Like we're well focused. So I think that's to your point, I think that's going to be part of the struggle, which is if we don't have a choice, we're going to have to just bring people in. And there is a high probability we will bring people in that are on F1 that are going to need H1B, but are going to have to pay the 100,000. I would argue the way companies will view it strategically is that 3 years is really the test period. Like, are you good enough that I want to pay the 100,000? Or are you just a generic employee that can kind of do the job? And if that's the case, I'm just going to probably freely let you go. So I could see your point. I think that is what's going to happen. I think there will be kind of a test period because there's like I've only met a handful of Americans in this industry, and it's like I keep being like I'm going to hire like some Americans and we're going to build a team, and they're just not there. Like I can't find them.
Right. So that's what I have seen over the years. Like all most of my bosses were like bunch of Indians, Chinese, Americans were there, but they were more on the business side of things. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's what I have seen. Yeah, and that's what I say that, I was talking to few students, this I guess yeah last night, and they are all applying to good colleges, and they said, but the tuition fee is $100,000. And that is
Mhm.
the issue, when you are paying $100,000, you need certain level of certainty, right? I mean, then and of course, every master's degree that you see, it's on an average, it's close to like $70,000, I would say. Tier twos are about 60, 70, tier one are like 100,000. So
Yeah.
they are so, so, so in stress. Like I can't just tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think part of it too is trying to understand for those that are outside of quantitative finance why quantitative finance is so hard and what the problem is. So for quantitative finance, I always bucket these three big categories. You have actual quants who build models, validate models, do math and statistics. You need to program as a necessity, but that's not your job. That's the whole different area. Math and stats is the core functional foundation applied to finance using computer science and programming. Then you have quant devs, which is going to be math and computer science, software engineering, because you're optimizing implementations, platforms, data processing, and all that. And then you have traders, which that's the business half. Like Americans can do that. I don't know why there are internationals working in that side of there. But you have quants and quant devs, and the issue is like I won't hire a tech person in the US to do quant dev because they don't have the math skills to optimize the process. They might be able to runtime, make the faster runtime with software, but typically they always say like, "Oh, just get more GPUs." And I'm like, "No, do the math, make it simple." And they don't have that. And so you have to find someone. Like I recently hired someone, I guess last year, it's been over a year, with a computer science undergrad from India and a PhD in mathematics in the US. But getting that combination, a graduate level, deep understanding of math, understanding the computer science part, is hard to find on the quant dev side. And then on the quant side of this, it's hard to get someone who has a weird blend. Because I'm not going to hire a statistics major or an applied math major because I'm going to have to spend a lot of time training them. There are great talent in these venues, but I have to find people that are unique. Like they love to code and they happen to be a statistics major or an applied math major. And then getting them at a mastery level so I don't have to train them. Because like that master's degree, like it's not like you show up and like it's this big party and you learn like three or four things and you graduate. It's like an intense year to 2 year program where you're turning out a ton of information, learning a lot of skills, and getting that weird combination. And I think a lot of the problems we're focusing on here in the United States is I don't know, Americans tend to get the one degree to do the one job. And quant finance breaks that because unfortunately it's one job, but it requires too many skills to do the one job, which is the absolute frustration now with AI because I don't have time to go learn a whole new field of study to fix something. Um, and so I think part of the problem is universities because universities have done an awful job at marketing and finding undergrad talent and bringing them in and explaining it to them. India and China have this figured out because people came here, got really good jobs, and they went back home and are like, you know what's a really awesome job? It's quantitative finance. And it has no finance really in it. All you're doing is math and stats and programming. And then a lot of them came over and they've really been building up these programs in quant finance here, and you get this weird blend of skills here. I think the training part, though, is the issue we're focusing on now. If we H1B passes and it mandates to everybody, to your point, there's going to be a pocket where we're going to have to hire internationals because we literally have a skills gap. And then the other issue is now is how do we train Americans at that point to do that? And as soon as you mention the word finance, STEM students run like hell because nobody wants to be in business, right? I went to statistics to do statistics or math to do math. I don't want to do business. And even like the big schools understand that, but when I go to like general state schools and I talk to the students, they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I work in finance, but I do math and stats." And nobody's heard of this job. They're like shocked. They're like, "Wait, what do you actually do on a daily basis?" And I'm trying to explain like I'm predicting like the probability of you defaulting on a loan, or I'm predicting where your retirement money should get placed and what are going to be the expected returns on this. But we're more or less like predicting the future on the economy and they don't know it exists. And I think it falls partially halfway on the universities. They need to go out in the graduate programs and bring in undergrads. And then I think
Right.
it falls also on the companies. Like when I was at Washington State University, which is a second largest state school in Washington State, where's JP Morgan at? Where's, Citibank? Where's HSBC? Like no one came to talk to us. And I think that's the other problem too, is the industry doesn't know it's been far easier and cheaper to bring in the Indians and the Chinese and even Europeans and South Americans who are very excited and understand it. Because I don't have to convince you to do the job. You already want to do the job. And so I
So
think that's been a big gap.
So from your past experience, um, do Americans really like to do quant related stuff, which is like math, stat, finance, programming? Do they like I can tell you like I used to like math. I used to like
Yeah.
it. I used to like programming. I did not have that much experience about finance, but then finance I learned during my job at my workplace, and then I decided to pursue a master's. But I really liked math and programming. But like from a American standpoint, like do you think Americans do they like doing something of this sort, or do you think they want to stay more on the like business side of things and less on the statistics or math side of things? Like what's your take on that? Do you
I think the problem is that we often get a slant being in the banks and the finance institutions because you have the finance bros who are Americans running the business, and then you have the internationals doing the math and the stats. The problem is there's actually a big pocket of students I've talked to that have come to me and said, like, I found your YouTube channel. I was searching for, I don't know, like Brownian motion or something, or stochastic processes or something ridiculous. And they fell into my channel and they've written me and said, I was a math student and I've done applied math. I have a master's and PhD. I don't want to go to academia because academia doesn't pay anything. It's too pie in the sky. I don't want to be forced to do research. I want to go to the industry. But then all these math students, for example, go, but where do I go? There's no math industry. So then
yeah.
they're like, should I go into engineering? But I don't have an engineering degree. So who's going to teach me the engineering concepts? So they don't feel like they can go there. And so I think a lot of these students end up in awful jobs. Like they end up falling into bottom level jobs. And it might be you have a math degree from, I don't know, say University of Michigan, because that's where I went. They just don't know where they're going. And I think a lot of it is no one knows them and no one's seen them. And it's kind of like an unspoken population that's just kind of floating under the radar, but they don't know how to get to an in industry. I don't even know what industry to go to. And of course, engineering industries don't want to take them because I'm not going to hire you. I'm doing electrical engineering. I mean, you have to go back, get an electrical engineering degree and do that. To your point, though, quantitative finance is very different in the sense that often it's actually preferred you don't know finance. Like I can teach you finance on the job because that's really easy to learn, but you need to have the math and the stats. That's the hardest piece to learn. But I think we're the only industry that has that mentality. The other industries like actuarial sciences, they tend to be snobs. The people I've met with in this industry, like they want you to have an actuarial degree and you have to go through this process. And it's the same with like engineering. Like engineers get all butthurt when you say like I'm a financial engineer, and they go, "No, you don't do real math. Like you're not a real engineer." And so I think there's a lot of Americans that don't even know where to head. And unfortunately, I think there's been a big lie sold in the last probably 40 years, which is every American needs a college degree because it makes more money, which isn't true anymore. Like that's fallen by the wayside because there's too many English degrees, history degrees. There's too many math degrees. There's a lot of math degrees I think now, and even statistics has a little more edge because I think the tech industry, they've realized they can go into tech, but I don't think they've realized they can go into the finance side of that. So I think there's a large population of Americans that could be tapped, but I also think a lot of undergrads aren't very excited. Like they might end up through a math degree or something else and get to the end of it realizing they don't know where to head, what to do. And so they end up going back for often like a business degree because business is so general that you
Right.
can work engineering, finance, space. You can really do anything with a business degree. So I think
Also,
that's part of the issue.
I'm not sure if you have noticed this, but at least I have noticed this. All the top MFA programs, right? Let's take top 15. Most of the program directors are Chinese or
Mhm.
from nearby nationalities. I do not see many Americans program director. I'm not sure if you have like a similar experience, but I was recently seeing most of the programs. I saw a bunch of like Georgia Tech has, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's what I saw. So I don't know if that's like more like, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'll give you some insight on. So I was almost one of the top programs reached out to me and wanted me to apply to be the director of their program.
Okay.
Um, Two other universities, I was vaguely aware of them hiring directors and talked to people that were intimately involved with the search process. So when they get a director for a quantitative finance master's, what they want is they want someone who has industry experience, um, who has an academic teaching experience, preferably a PhD. And so then that narrows that down. Like I'm not technically qualified because I don't have a PhD. I'm not from academia. And so they end up in this weird bind where it's like you're trying to find someone with academic experience and professional experience, and those people typically don't exist. And so it narrows, I think, down the pool to how many people have done quantitative finance in the last, 10, 15, 20 years. It's predominantly internationals. And
Right.
then when you say who has an academic degree, it's probably typically internationals as well. So I think the only programs that have had Americans was Peter Carr over at NYU.
Yeah.
So he did great because he had the academic background, the industry background, he had the communication, he could bridge it all and put it together. But his program is very unique because it's predominantly practitioners, at least when he was there. And then I think UCLA had an American, or UC Berkeley has had an American, which is fine. But I would argue some of the better programs are programs that are trying to do more math and stats because that's what the industry wants. But I don't know how you get there. I think to your point, right, there hasn't been a lot of people qualified to do it. And so you essentially have to find what you have. And even those that are Americans, they tend to be Chinese or Indian descent just because the skill sets tend to line up with that.
Mm. So Dimitri, like, what would be your take or what would be your suggestion to like international? Because eventually, I guess whosoever is watching this podcast, I'm sure like most of the students are planning to come to the US for quantitative finance. So like, what would be your suggestions to them? Anything you like, because it's also a risk, right? I mean, putting in that much, and I can tell you in India, I mean when someone goes back just with a master's, he can I mean the person can target close to $30,000 to $30,000 to like 40, $50,000, not more than that. I'm 30,000 also. I'm saying, it's really good. I'm being very generous saying 30,000. So that's where the issue is, because if someone is taking that off a high loan, it's not possible to come back to India to recover the loan quickly, because in US itself it takes like good amount of years, right? So just wanted to hear your thought process on that.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do, but probably the most necessary, is to figure out how competitive you are. And to do that, I would think about the not grades. No one cares about your GPA and your schools and all that. But I'd think about the process of like those that are really excited and they love quantitative finance because they want to be traders. You're probably going to get replaced by Americans because like we're talking about, there's a lot of business students that are all American. Like there's really no reason to bring in international hires for a lot of business jobs. Um, Also, I find that people that are typically heavily focused more on the trading side of this, I know this is a stereotype, but tend not to be focused on the math and the stats. You're not doing something very quantitative. You really don't need the quantitative finance degree. So you might have a different path or a different origin. Quantitative finance is extraordinarily expensive. As you know, it's the cheapest ones are like 60 grand. Most of them are 70, $80,000. Most of them out, a lot of them are getting into $100,000. And then if you go to a good program in a top city like New York City, you're looking at a lot of money there. So I would say if you're really serious about it, you really want to do math and stats, and you have done your research. So even for those that want to be traders or those that want to be on different sides of the industry or whatever, go on LinkedIn and find people that are currently working in the US in a job that you think is beneficial and do an informational interview with them and figure out like, do they like the job? What skills are required? Because I think this will weed out a bunch of candidates where it's like you're kind of on the fence, like you're like, I could make $1 million being a quant in the United States. And then I'm like, that's not very likely, even for an American or someone already here. And so I think if you start to come to reality and you're like, okay, do I really want to take this process? Do I really want to be in America in the long run? I think it's definitely worth the risk because we have the best educational institutions. The job market is stellar, and it could potentially change your life night and day different. But I think if you're like thinking it's going to be this get rich quick scheme and you're going to go and get the degree and get the job, which I've seen a lot of students do, and they'll go to top names, Columbia, MIT, Harvard, UC Berkeley, and they end up unemployed. It's often because they lack like the personal interest and the drive to learn the material. Like you see it, right? I mean, it's like you do YouTube for essentially for free. Like you do YouTube because you love doing the content and talking about the ideas and the topics and meeting people. But I think there is a chunk of people that are coming over thinking it's going to be like an easy process. Like I had somebody ask me this last week, Dimitri, what's the easiest way just to get my foot in the door? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Yeah, there's no easy way. Yeah.
all hard.
Yeah.
So
Al-
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it if you're willing to put in the effort and the work.
Also, Dimitri, like last question from my side.
Yeah.
What is the starting salary and graduate, can expect, let's say in a bank versus in any, let's say, trading company? Because I mean, I really, this myth, right? $200,000 of salary when you graduate, and people just think, oh, I'll get $200,000, and eventually when you do not get $200,000, you so just from, because you have been in the industry from so long, I mean, what's the average salary, and like when people, let's say, jump the ladder, right, how much they can expect to like raise from the salary perspective? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm actually doing a bunch of work right now in all of the data of a ton of programs from 2016 through today, which most people don't realize the average salary back in 2016 was around $70,000. Between 2016 and 2020, it rose from 70 to 80. We have seen a little bit of a spike with all the inflation, which is the only real driver of that. The average, and this is top programs, top programs. This is like Baruch, MIT, Columbia, NYU. Like these are the top programs. This is not including like tiny state schools. The average salary now I think is like 120.
Hmm,
So
okay.
it's not stellar. Like it's not the crazy 200 and something thousand dollars that people are quoting. I would say too, when you look at the numbers, there's a lot of variation in the programs. I've seen some programs have like I saw one program. I'm like scratching my head, like this has to be an error. They go from like a $70,000 average one year to 130 the next year. There's no way you're doubling this. Like there's something wrong with the data. Part of this is just understanding math and stats, right? If you have 30 graduates, what's the likelihood that your data is going to have massive variations? A lot.
Right.
Um, Also, I think with that as well is it depends on what jobs you're placing. I've seen some of the top programs with very high salaries, and the reason is their graduates had 5 years experience on average before coming to this program. So they're already working on Wall Street, already making 150. And so when you come out and you have a fancy degree, you're making 200. Um, so experience is one. The other one is a lot of students end up going into quant dev. Quant dev tends to go into high frequency trading. High frequency trading tends to focus they tend to place in the very, 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 very top HFT funds, and there's only a handful of them. So I know like Christina Chi from Data Bento did a post on like there's only like this many firms in that space. And out of that many firms, each firm has like 6 employees at most. They might be hiring one per year. So you get down to like 30 openings per year. But I think more broadly, as we're discussing, like quantitative finance as an industry is huge. And Carnegie Mellon had some data, and I think it was like 70%, 60 to 70% of all of their graduates went to banks first
Right.
and worked there for a few years. And then that changed into the buy side, the investing side of that. Now, the actual truth of that is most salaries cap out at about 250. Doesn't matter where you go, banks, hedge funds, whatever, 250, 300-ish. I've seen up to 450 if you're in like super, super senior levels. You get a lot of your money though in bonus. So the bonus part is where you make a lot of money. So again, depending even at a bank, you're gonna have, I mean, compare apples to apples here because I think this is another struggle. People say there was a quant researcher at, Citadel or something that took home 800,000. No one in the model development space is making that at a bank. And I'm like, that's true. But the CRO, who's essentially the same seniority and like the same responsibilities and the same career growth, made 1.2 million last year at, XYZ, whatever the firm is like Santander or somewhere else. And people are like, well, that's an executive title. I'm like, but the thing is, like, Citadel doesn't have a lot of these, they don't have the quants. It's a smaller firm, smaller people. Those people that are making a lot of times those 7-figure salaries are very, very senior, or they're one diamond in the rough and they make that for 3 years and then they burn out and something goes away with it. So I think it's things to keep in mind of how the compensation is structured. Also, you have garden leave, which you don't have at banks. So you might make, let's say, I don't know, say you make $180,000. Let's just pretend you make the 200,000 coming out. You work for 3 years, you make $600,000, and you get required to take off 6 to 12 months. You have a year where you made nothing. I think a lot of the other issues with this as well is I saw recently one of the firms they said on average the average employee's compensation was 2 million for the year. I go, yes, that's true, but big but the people that drove that profit probably made $30 million or $10 million. So you got a guy with 10 million and you got somebody with 200,000. When you average these out based on the numbers and the weights, you might end up with 2 million, but a lot of employees don't have that. So is it possible? I don't want to discourage people and say like it doesn't happen because obviously it does happen. But I think often with the titles, the experience, the competitiveness, people often lose sight of like all the factors that have changed that. It's almost like saying you should get an MBA because, all these CEOs are making over, $5, $10 million each. Like it's a really hard position to be a CEO somewhere. It's a really, really hard position to be a quant that's going to make, crazy salary numbers.
Right.
Um, but banks are stable. I think most people end up in banks. Banks are more stable. There's more jobs. To your point, I think if you set the expectation, I'm going to be at the average. Like, I think industry average now is like 100, 120-ish for New York
Right.
City. Now, if you move to like Dallas, I pay less because I worked at small firms, but also we paid less because it's Dallas. Like, it's cheap to live here. It's dirt cheap. But if you're in New York City, it's going to cost a lot more. So you have to kind of, make an adjustment, a cost of living adjustment there. But yeah, I think if you set your expectations on the actual averages of programs and you go and you download it and actually look at it and don't find the maximums, but try to find like a good average of all of them, I think you'll realize like, I tell people like I can survive like 70 grand. I can survive very comfortably on 70 grand.
Yeah.
Like you could be living the dream. Like
Also, Dimitri, like your last advice to students who are applying, let's say they have decided that they will come to the US, right? Take that risk. Now, because most of the students would be either coming in spring or let's say in fall 26, what should they do in this, let's say 6 months to 12 months? What should they focus on? Should they read anything? Should they read any book? That anything from your any guidance from your side? Yeah.
yeah. The number one advice, which has been a more recent thing of mine, is go to conferences. So I was a poor college student who went to no conferences, who traveled nowhere because it cost too much money. Um, but I am finding out a lot of the students I'm in advising, they, I mean, it blows my mind. I'm in New York City at a conference, and there's like three students from this program. There's two students from this other program that are in New York City. Like, you're already there, and sometimes the schools will even sponsor you. So ask your school, say, hey, I want to go. Somebody recently flew out, I think, from like UC Davis from California. Their school paid for them to travel, fly, and go to the conference in New York City. But I think what a lot of students are missing is the networking opportunity. Because I can tell you from a hiring perspective, there's nothing I hate more than having to dig through hundreds of resumes. Like I would much rather like say like I have an open position. Let me look at my LinkedIn contacts and find someone who I know is a top talent, and we'll put the job posting up just to see if we catch any great, hires or candidates. But I like doing that much better because I'm like, I know you. Like I've met you, I've talked to you, I know you're going to be a good fit. And a lot of those opportunities have come solely through just conferences. And I had a student recently from India who actually gave me, I don't know if you can see. Hold on.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah. Okay.
I have this awesome Indian handicraft thing.
Oh, this, I don't know, but this looks something from my state. I can tell you.
It's from the Bombay store.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, very close to my state. Yeah.
so it is. He sent this, and I was like, okay, like I have helped you. Like I get it. I really do appreciate it. It's really cool. I have this, and I have some stationery he sent me. And anyways, and he followed all my advice. I helped him when he was back in India. I gave him some advice when he was in India. And then he came to the US. He's like, hey, I'm going to NYU. And I'm like, awesome. So I gave him some advice at NYU. And then I saw him at these conferences and he goes, Dimitri, no one's going to the conferences. He goes, it's a gold mine. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, I have two job offers and I need to talk to you. Can you help me figure out which path I should take in careers? And I go, two job offers? I'm like, I'm an American quant finance. I had no job offers. Like no one wanted to talk to me. But that networking skill piece is really what's going to A, get you the job that you're going to need. And so if it's going to be harder with the H1B, you really do need to get in front of people. Like make me want you. So I'm like, guys, we have this hire. He's from this school. We'll pay the $100,000 because it's going to be worth it in the long run. The only way to do that's really the networking and the branding. The second piece of that is going to be network with students. So I don't know about when you were at UNC or UC NC
I see.
State,
Yeah.
but when I was at Michigan, it was extremely competitive, and it was like nobody helped. A lot of people didn't help other people unless you were like in your niche, like friend of five or 10 or whatever. And that was very detrimental, I think, to the program's job placement numbers. Because, like, I mean, where do you apply? Citadel, Nomura, JP Morgan, Citi, Goldman Sachs. And then you run out of places to apply. And you're trying to find the little firm that nobody else is applying to. And so I think a lot of students, at least when I was in school, refused to help. And I think if you network, even just message someone on LinkedIn, be like, Mehul, I see you're at NC State. I'm at University of Michigan. Like, I'd love just to like meet people in the industry and network. These are some of the places I've applied. Maybe this will help you. Like that sort of, I think, community will help people find better jobs. And I know it's hard because you're like, I want the job so bad, so I don't want to help anybody else. But I think it will help you find a job. And often those people that get job offers are networking and doing things right. And then if they happen to get two job offers, they might message someone and say, hey, this is a great opportunity. Make sure you apply to this company. Or, which I've done in the past, I've turned down a job and been like, I'm not interested, but there's this great candidate you need to talk to. And I've messaged them and sent them over, and they got an interview. So I think the networking piece is the piece that makes you stand out in the industry. And I think it's even more critical now with the H1B pass, with the new rules and things coming, because you have to differentiate yourself. There's not going to be as many positions, and companies aren't going to want to spend $100,000 to make a hire.
Yeah. Any book recommendation that students should really read, or any suggestions like that, which is like possible, let's say for anyone to read, or any suggestions on the book?
That's a good question. Um, Trying to think of a good one. Two examples of this. One of these is going to be time series analysis or analysis of financial time series by Rui Say, which is TSAY. It's been a recent favorite of mine. The reason being is I find a lot of academic books industry wide have been too theoretical or so delusionally applied, like in Python, that there's no value in the book at all. His book, I think, is a great tool because it has code, so you can like feel the process and learn it. I think it's a really excellent book to get in that idea process and see how the industry works and kind of play with things from a code level. From an understanding the industry level, um, there's two books I'd recommend, which are fun, easy reads, I think, for anyone, even if you're not in quant finance. And that would be Fisher Black's book, which is it's not actually by Fisher Black, but um, the book's called Fisher Black and the Revolutionary Idea of Finance. It's by I think Perry Merling is the author on this book. I don't have the fancy cover anymore it's somewhere, but this book is really excellent because I think when you start to look at the history of quantitative finance and you understand like what we're trying to do, which is not all the fancy nonsensical things you see on Reddit, you get an idea of like what it's actually like to be a quant. My Life as a Quant by Manuel Derman's pretty good as well. But I think this book by Fisher Black for me helps really boil down like you do math to do math. You're not doing math for like big paychecks and everything else. Like you do the stats and math because it's fun. I think it's a good idea on the industry. The other book is by Manuel Derman and it is Models Behaving Badly. I don't know if you've read that one.
I have not read, but yeah, I know like it's actually a good one. Yes.
Yeah, so I like that book, and the reason being is that was my career in validation, in the sense that everybody's out building models, and your models are all awful, and you're not doing the risk management behind the models. That book is not written very technically at all. It's not made for math or stats, but it kind of generally explains why the markets blew up, why finance is such a hard space to be in, and why it's hard to predict, which I'd argue a lot of scientists should probably read that are in the industry because they don't tend to grasp that. Like we're not a hard science. But I think that book also would give you a little bit of an edge. And the reason being is when you have these sorts of understandings of the industry, you can talk more logically with industry practitioners. So you don't come off as a student, where it's like you're like pie in the sky, like I'm going to solve the markets.
Right, right. No, that's actually good. So, like from my side, if students are hearing, I would suggest these two books. One is, of course, Option Futures and Derivatives by John C. Hull. I've read this book multiple times. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like the book, to be honest. Yeah. And the second one is Paul Wilmoth introduces Quantitative Finance. I mean, both are like, I mean, they go parallel, but yeah, I really like these two books. So yeah, that's what would be my suggestion to the students. Yeah.
What do you like about Paul Wilmont's book? I've never read his books. I don't like his personal views on America, which has really rubbed me the wrong way. But I've always intended to buy his book, but I've just never had the justification to buy it. Like, sell me on the book. Why is it a good book?
No, definitely. I mean, if you see, there are a bunch of screenshots attached of, how the modeling is done. Because what I personally see is no one talks, like most of the authors, they talk more on the theoretical piece and less on the practical. But I guess because of those screenshots, I at least get to understand, okay. And this goes maybe back in, when I was in my master's, and I actually I did a podcast with Paul Wilmot, and he says that pursuing a master's in US is useless and pursuing a CFA is better. so, so, so yeah, I understand. Like, yeah, there's something between. I don't know what's there, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I've debated on buying the book because even if like I disagree with him, I'm like a lot of people have recommended his book.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you know, you never have enough time to read all the books. least I buy books. I'm so excited. I'm like, I bought a new agentic AI book. And I'm like,
All right.
I'm gonna read this, and I have a project, and I need to do the work on it, and it's still set on it's on my dresser in my room for like 4 weeks now, 5 weeks. I'm like, I probably don't get to it till at least next year.
Okay. Sure, sure, Dimitri. But thank you so much, Dimitri, for joining in for the podcast. And I mean, I guess, yeah, I guess students can take a wise decision whether to come or not. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.